Today, we're going to crack open an academic study from about 15 years ago that honestly plays out like a great detective story. It was trying to solve a mystery that has only gotten more complicated over time. Why do so many ads just completely miss the mark? What's really wild is how its findings feel even more on point today than they did back then. So let's start unpacking the clues. So our story kicks off with a major communication breakdown. The first clue? It seems consumers are looking at brands and just thinking, you don't even seem to know who you are or what you stand for. And, well, that just creates this huge gap between what companies are selling and what people are actually looking for. You know that feeling, right? When you're being sold something and you're just thinking, this has nothing to do with me. When that happens, everybody just ends up feeling disappointed. People look at a brand and the value they're hoping to find, it's just not there. It's a huge, massive misconnection. But, at the end of the day, this isn't a one-way street. The real problem here is that it's a two-way misunderstanding. Advertisers are trying, and failing, to figure out what consumers want, just as much as consumers are struggling to see the point in all the ads. So let's lay it all out. This is the central puzzle that this whole research project set out to solve. A puzzle that, let's be honest, has kept marketing pros up at night for decades. And this quote, it just nails the consequences of that puzzle. Because everyone disagrees, you've got all this creativity and just tons of money constantly on the line. And the way success is judged, usually it's just raw sales figures, which is a terrible metric because it never ever tells you the whole story of an ad's real impact. Okay, so to solve a puzzle this big, you can't just start from scratch. Our researcher was smart. He built his entire case on the work of 4 intellectual giants. And that strong foundation is a huge reason why this study still holds up so well today. Think of these scholars as providing the essential clues and the code-breaking tools needed to decipher the super complex worlds of communication and, why we buy things. Their work was literally the bedrock for the whole investigation. All right, let's look at this lineup. Each one of these experts brought a critical piece to the puzzle. You've got Alfred Politz, who brought the hardcore methodology for research. Then Rama Bijapurkar, with these deep insights into the Indian consumer. Of course, the legendary Noam Chomsky, whose work on language helped decode the ad messages themselves. And then, and this is so cool, Paul Ekman, the guy who pioneered the science of facial expressions to measure people's real, unfiltered emotions. What a team. So, with all that brain power setting the stage, our detective headed out into the field. And this is where things get really cool. And honestly, pretty groundbreaking for the time. He designed this clever, multi-part investigation to get past all the polite, surface-level answers people tend to give. So the researcher combined 2 pretty standard methods, surveys and digging through existing research, with a third approach that was just genius. He decided he wasn't just going to ask people what they thought, he was going to watch what they thought. And yeah, this is the heart of the experiment. By filming a focus group and then using Paul Ekman's science to analyze their fleeting microexpressions, the study could actually see genuine gut reactions. That quick flash of confusion or real delight or total boredom. The stuff you'd never ever get from a questionnaire. This is how the research got to a much deeper truth. All right, so after gathering all this evidence from the surveys, the library, and that incredible focus group footage, what did our researcher actually find out? What did the data really say? So the first big finding really shows you how much the world has changed. You got to remember, this was 15 years ago. A whopping 75% of people were still going to newspapers and magazines to get information about products. That was the main channel, which is just a world away from the fragmented digital chaos of today. But here's the real question. Were people just kind of flipping through the pages, or were they actually paying attention to the ads? The researchers' initial guess, the null hypothesis, was that people probably don't read ads that carefully. But when he ran the data through a statistical reality check, the data basically screamed wrong. That idea was totally rejected. It proved people were actually paying very close attention. And what these findings did was provide a strong empirical base, real hard data, to back up a classic model called the Scott-Ward model. It's basically a 6-step roadmap that shows how an ad can take someone from just seeing it all the way to actually changing how they shop. The big takeaway? An ad's impact isn't just random luck. It can actually be a predictable science. Okay, so let's zoom out. How do all these clues, the fact that people relied on print, that they were paying close attention, how does that all build to a bigger picture? And more importantly, Why on earth should anyone in media or marketing today care about a study from 15 years ago? Well, here's where the study starts to feel kind of prophetic. It pointed out these troubling trends that have just exploded since this was written. I mean, think about it. This was 15 years ago, and it was already flagging. Falling readership, people wanting quick info instead of deep knowledge, our brains being totally overloaded with messages, and a drop in ethical communication. Sound familiar? So here's the bottom line. That fundamental disconnect we talked about at the very beginning, it is being magnified and made so much worse by our modern media landscape. There's this massive, growing gap between the content being shoved at us and what we actually want or need. And that leaves us with this one last, really provocative question to think about. This whole study gives us hard evidence that there is a real science to how advertising works. So what if that power was used differently? What if, instead of just creating hype to sell more stuff, advertising was used scientifically and ethically to actually help people achieve their goals and aspirations? What would that world even look like?